Democratic lawmakers are calling on the Biden administration to reverse a controversial decision to defend former President Trump against a defamation lawsuit. The suit was filed in 2019 by writer E. Jean Carroll after Mr. Trump denied her allegations of rape, saying, quote, "She's not my type." In a brief filed with a federal appeals court Monday, the DOJ justified its decision to take over the former president's defense by pointing to a law governing suits against federal employees. Members of the House Judiciary Committee sent a letter to Attorney General Merrick Garland calling the decision profoundly misguided. They urged Garland to reconsider, adding, quote, "President Trump's disgusting comments about Ms. Carroll had nothing to do with his official responsibilities as president." In a recent Politico piece, senior legal affairs contributor Josh Gerstein said the case illustrates how administrations of sharply different political outlooks often flock to the same legal positions in court. And Josh joins me now with more. Hi there, Josh. Welcome. So Attorney General Merrick Garland was asked about the decision to defend former President Trump during a Senate hearing on the DOJ's budget Wednesday. Here's what he said.
The essence of the rule of law is what I said when I accepted the nomination for Attorney General. It is that like cases be treated alike, that there not be one rule for Democrats and another for Republicans, that there not be one rule for friends and another for foes. Now, it is not always easy to apply that rule. Sometimes it means that we have to make a decision about the law that we would never have made and that we strongly disagree with as a matter of policy.
So tell us more about the law the Biden Justice Department is using to justify this and what it means for the future of this case.
Well, so this is a pretty widely used law that applies pretty much any time a federal employee commits some act that someone might sue over. Let's say you were walking down the street and you were hit by a Secret Service car in Washington, D.C., or even maybe in any of those cases, there's a law that can be used where the federal government basically steps in and assumes liability for the lawsuit. And that's the law that Attorney General Bill Barr invoked last year here in the suit brought by Jean Carroll. What's unusual here is that this is not obviously a slip and fall or a car accident. This is a different kind of civil suit over a libel case. While the claim is from Ms. Carroll that President Trump raped her 20 years ago, the lawsuit can't go back that far in time, but she sued him over his denials and maybe some of the rather disgusting comments that you featured a little bit earlier or referenced earlier. And so this law is often brought into play to defend federal employees who, in the course of their jobs, end up getting sued.
Well, Justice Department lawyers are also fighting to block the release of a 2019 DOJ memo detailing former Attorney General Barr's decision not to charge former President Trump with obstruction after the Mueller investigation. Why?
Well, they're basically saying that releasing that information could inhibit sort of a free and frank discussion within the Justice Department about these sorts of high-level decisions. You're talking about the Attorney General and some of his top advisors, albeit under the last administration. But where I do think that Attorney General Garland's comments today may have been a little bit off the mark was, I don't think these are situations where the law essentially requires the Justice Department to make the decisions that it's made or has stuck to in the last few days. Granted, there are laws that allow them to do that, but these are discretionary decisions. And I think what the department is saying here is, we don't think it's a good idea for presidents to face the kinds of lawsuits we were just discussing, and we don't think it's a good idea for the Justice Department to be forced to release memos that are exchanged between the Attorney General and his top advisors. I do think the Biden administration could have come to a different conclusion in either of these situations. It was not a case where the law forced Attorney General Garland's hand.
So, Josh, with that in mind, I also want to ask about the legal questions around the removal of racial justice protesters from Lafayette Square last June. On what grounds is the DOJ asking to dismiss lawsuits brought by civil rights leaders against former President Trump, Bill Barr, and law enforcement agencies related to that event?
Well, they're basically essentially arguing that these officials acted reasonably and that there are sort of technical grounds on which these sorts of lawsuits can't be permitted, that there's no clear constitutional violation, there's no clear evidence that these actions were taken to try to inhibit people's First Amendment rights. Again, I think you have the Justice Department defending what is essentially an institutional position that they're trying to reduce the number of cases where the government is held responsible for some sort of action taken by federal employees, federal officials, federal law enforcement. That said, it does strike me in this kind of a suit, it's possible that the Justice Department, even as it defends it in court, may, under this new administration, enter into negotiations, as they're doing in various because it's obviously politically awkward for the current administration to keep fighting this case.
Okay, we lost you for a bit there, Josh, but I think we have you back now. So I want to ask, bottom line, when it comes to these criticisms directed at the Attorney General, Merrick Garland, accusing the Justice Department of siding with former President Trump, what do you make of this argument that it's evidence of what is meant to be an apolitical branch of government acting in what it believes is the best interest of the law and not politics here?
Well, Elaine, to some extent, I think President Biden's getting what he should have expected. He said he wanted an independent Justice Department, and he's getting decisions now that are being made that maybe don't make the president that politically comfortable. I think the real question is, as time goes on here, you often see these kinds of hiccups and glitches in the first few months of an administration, especially with all the leftover questions from the previous one. The question is, will the Justice Department come more into alignment, perhaps, with the president's political priorities, as time progresses, as the new officials, the new appointees at the Justice Department get confirmed, get their sea legs, and really get a grip on what's been happening at the department over the past few years.
All right, something we'll be watching for. Politico's Josh Gerstein. Josh, good to have you. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Elaine.